Have you ever stepped off a plane and felt a city instantly rewire your nervous system? That is the only way to describe arriving in Ho Chi Minh City. It doesn't just welcome you, it engulfs you. The humidity hits your skin, the roar of a million motorbikes fills your ears, and suddenly you are part of this massive, pulsing organism.
It is a complete sensory hijacking, and I mean that in the best possible way. People often make the mistake of viewing Saigon merely as a transit hub or a purely commercial center. But underneath that corporate, fast-paced veneer is a city that forces you to feel everything at maximum volume. It is a place where every street corner tells a story of survival, reinvention, and relentless ambition.
Exactly. And that is what we are diving into today. How does a city balance a deeply traumatic past with a dizzying, futuristic present? Why do outsiders fall so deeply in love with a metropolis that on paper sounds completely chaotic? Let's start with the soul of the city, because you really can't grasp the modern ambition of Saigon without confronting its history.
You absolutely have to start with the historical core. The architectural whiplash alone is fascinating. You can stand in District 1 and look at the Central Post Office and the Notre Dame Cathedral, which are these pristine, elegant slices of French colonial ambition. And the post office isn't just a museum piece, it is a fully functioning utility. You can literally mail a postcard from a desk that feels like it belongs in 19th century Paris.
There is something almost poetic about that, using a relic of colonialism to send a mundane greeting back home. But just a short walk away, the narrative shifts drastically. The Independence Palace feels like a perfectly preserved time capsule from the 1960s, with its sprawling lawns and underground bunkers. And then, of course, there is the War Remnants Museum.
The War Remnants Museum is a profoundly sobering experience, and honestly, a mandatory one. It strips away the Hollywood gloss of the conflict and forces you to look at the raw, unfiltered human cost. It is heavy, it is uncomfortable, and it should be. But what makes it so essential is that it recontextualizes everything else you see in the city. When you understand the sheer scale of the devastation this country endured, the rapid, towering growth of modern Saigon isn't just impressive economic data. It is a monument to human resilience.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The upward momentum isn't just about wealth, it is about reclaiming the future. Which brings us perfectly to the modern skyline. Saigon is growing vertically at a terrifyingly beautiful pace. You have landmark 81 piercing the clouds, currently the tallest building in Vietnam, and the Bitexco Financial Tower with its iconic lotus bud shape.
The lotus bud is such a fitting metaphor, isn't it? A flower that blooms out of the mud, rendered in steel and glass. But this vertical growth brings up a fascinating urban dilemma. When you take the elevator up to a sky bar in Landmark 81, sipping an overpriced cocktail while looking down at the clouds, you are physically and economically disconnected from the street level. Cities that build upward at this velocity risk creating a stratified society, the wealthy floating above the smog, while the working class navigates the chaos below.
It is the classic sci-fi trope playing out in real time. But what I love about Saigon is how the local youth subvert that corporate sterility. Take the cafe apartments at 42 𝗛𝗡𝗄. Here you have this decaying mid-century apartment block. And instead of letting a developer bulldoze it to build another soulless glass mall, the youth hijacked it. It is now a vertical maze, packed with dozens of quirky independent cafes, boutiques, and hidden balconies.
That building is a masterpiece of organic urban adaptation. It represents a subtle rebellion against hyper-commercialization. In the West, city planners would have condemned the structure. In Saigon, the decay was simply repurposed into a canvas for entrepreneurship. You have the heavy, brutalist bones of the past filled with the caffeinated, neon-lit ambition of Gen Z. It proves that a city's culture doesn't come from the top down. It grows from the cracks in the concrete.
Speaking of culture, growing from the cracks, we have to talk about the street life. Because if you want to understand the real Saigon, you have to get a little messy. You can't just stay in the air-conditioned malls. You have to dive into the back alleys behind Ben Than Market and sit on a tiny plastic stool.
Those tiny plastic stools are the great equalizers of Vietnamese society. You will see a businessman in a tailored suit sitting next to a student, both hunched over a steaming bowl of crab noodle soup or bún riêu. The street food culture here is legendary because it is utterly unpretentious. But there is a spiritual side to this chaos too. If the market is the stomach of the city, places like the Jade Emperor Pagoda are its conscience.
Oh, the atmosphere in that pagoda is incredible. The thick clouds of incense smoke, the intricate wood carvings, the quiet devotion happening just steps away from the roaring traffic. It is a pocket of deep stillness in a city that never stops moving. Even former US presidents have made a point to stop there.
It highlights the dual nature of the city. Saigon demands your energy, but it also provides these hidden sanctuaries where you can recharge. And that contrast is exactly what draws so many expatriates to settle here. Though the way expats live in Saigon brings up another complex dynamic.
You are talking about the Great Divide, 𝗛𝗢𝗡𝗘𝗬𝗖 versus Thao Dien.
Exactly. They represent two entirely different ways outsiders consume the city. On one hand, you have 𝗛𝗢𝗡𝗘𝗬𝗖, the infamous backpacker street. It is a relentless assault of neon lights, thumping bass, fire breathers, and cheap beer. It is hedonistic, chaotic, and caters to a very specific, fleeting type of tourism.
It is where you go when you want the city to chew you up and spit you out by 3 a.m. But then, across the river in District 2, you have Thao Dien, which is often dubbed the expat village. It is a completely different universe. Quiet, leafy streets, craft breweries, artisanal vegan cafes, and chic concept stores.
Thao Dien is a fascinating sociological bubble. It provides a soft landing for global nomads and remote workers. You get the tropical climate and the economic benefits of Southeast Asia, but with the comforts of a Western suburb. But we have to ask the philosophical question: when we build these highly curated enclaves, are we insulating ourselves from the very culture we traveled across the world to experience? Gentrification in these areas often prices out the locals who gave the city its charm in the first place.
That is the double-edged sword of being a digital nomad hotspot. You want authenticity, but you also want high-speed Wi-Fi and an oat milk latte. It is a paradox. But perhaps the best way to bridge that gap, to step out of the bubble without diving into the absolute madness of 𝗛𝗢𝗡𝗘𝗬𝗖, is the river. A dinner cruise on the Saigon River at night, watching the city lights shimmer on the black water, gives you a moment to just process the scale of it all.
The river is the original artery of the city, long before the highways and skyscrapers. Seeing the skyline from the water gives you a sense of perspective. You realize that despite the rapid modernization, nature still holds the ultimate power here, which brings to mind the most defining natural force in Saigon: the weather.
The weather. You can't talk about this city without mentioning the sudden, violent, and oddly beautiful afternoon downpours. There are essentially two seasons, sunny and rainy. And if you are wandering around without a poncho, you are going to learn a hard lesson very quickly.
But those sudden downpours are actually a hidden blessing. When the sky breaks open, the relentless pace of the city is forced to pause. The motorbikes scatter, people crowd under whatever awnings they can find, and you are often forced to duck into a random hidden alleyway, a hem, just to stay dry.
And that is exactly when the magic happens. You find yourself in a tiny family-run cafe, waiting out the storm. You order a 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, that incredibly strong, sweet, iced milk coffee, and you just sit there. You watch the rain wash the dust off the streets, you listen to the thunder, and for a brief moment, the chaotic metropolis feels incredibly intimate and quiet.
That right there is the quintessential Saigon experience. It isn't found at the top of a skyscraper or in a museum exhibit. It is found in the forced pauses. The city is a masterclass in contrasts. It is a place that remembers its scars but refuses to be defined by them. It embraces the future with open arms while clutching a cup of traditional coffee in its hands.
It really makes you wonder about the trajectory of these rapidly globalizing cities. As Saigon continues to build higher, as more glass towers replace the old colonial stones and the decaying apartment blocks, will it be able to maintain that gritty, beautiful soul? Or will it eventually polish away the very chaos that makes it so magnetic?
That is the ultimate question for any modern metropolis. Progress is inevitable, and it brings undeniable benefits to the people living there. But the challenge is ensuring that the soul of the city, the street vendors, the hidden alleyways, the organic communities, isn't sacrificed on the altar of modernity. For now, at least, Saigon seems to hold both worlds in a delicate, thrilling balance.
A delicate, thrilling balance. I think that is the perfect note to leave on. For anyone listening who hasn't yet experienced the heat, the history, and the heartbeat of this city, perhaps it is time to pack a bag. Just don't forget your umbrella, and be prepared to leave a little piece of yourself behind in those narrow alleyways.